Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We've got some very important announcements for you all this morning. Now, I recently entered frontline politics. Prior to this, I had a career in business as a technology entrepreneur. And in that career, I learned that, like most things in life, trajectory and momentum are far, far more important than absolute position. And that's why, despite all of the awful things that are happening in this country, I'm incredibly optimistic about this movement, about our party, and about what Britain can and will become. The first announcement we have for you is that in the context of us having 15,000 members a year ago and polling at 8%, today I'm delighted to announce as chairman of Reform UK that Reform not only is polling at 20%, but has in excess of 100,000 fully paid up members of Reform UK. Why are people joining this movement in such vast numbers? Our support all over the country is overwhelming. I'll tell you why. It's because ever more British people, 1 in 5 British people now and growing, see in Reform the only party that is willing to stand up for British people, defend and celebrate British values, and never compromise on the principle that the interests of the British people come first. And that means securing our borders. It means ending the population explosion, and you'll have seen those shocking immigration statistics that Nigel will talk about shortly. It means ensuring that, firstly, the laws of this country are enforced and applied, but secondly, that they are enforced and applied evenly, with no group getting preferential or inferior treatment. It means getting the bureaucratic state out of the way so that we can unleash the dynamism and talent and hard-working British people. We need to cut taxes. We need to ensure that tens of billions of pounds of hard-working British taxpayers' money is no longer spent on citizens of foreign countries, while British pensioners who have paid into the system their whole lives are forced to freeze, while our farmers are being forced to sell their land, while hard-working British taxpayers are taxed up to their eyeballs, all while British public services like the NHS stand on the brink of collapse. All of this is the result of 14 years of Tory rule. I won't call them Conservatives because I don't think they live up to that name anymore. And now, under this awful Labour government, everything I just described is accelerating in pace. So what we need is true leadership, and we have 5 MPs in Parliament in the House of Commons. I'm sure many of you watching this will agree they do a far superior job of holding this dystopian Keir Starmer government to account than the 121 Tory MPs. But we know the only way we can unleash the potential of Britain, turn Britain into the prosperous and powerful and poised country we know it can be, is with real leadership. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, we must win elections. That's the only way we can bring the change that this country needs to fruition. Nigel asked me to become chairman in mid-July, and he gave me the mandate of professionalising this party. He said, we need to harness, and we all know this, we need to harness the extraordinary enthusiasm that exists for Reform UK all over the country and turn that into votes at the ballot box, because that is the only way change arrives. And in that time, in those 4 months, we've gone from 69,000 to 100,000 members. We had a remarkable conference at the NEC in Birmingham. And regardless of your views on the political spectrum, I put it to you that it was the most professional, impeccably produced conference of all of them this year. It was certainly the only one with pyrotechnics. It was imbued with an extraordinary energy and optimism. And Nigel talks about this a lot. that on the one hand, we are clear-eyed at reform about the challenges at hand, the scale and the magnitude of not just what reform needs to achieve, but also from where the country must first recover and then gain and soar to new heights. So therefore, reform supporters, reform voters, reform members, all 100,000 of them, are simultaneously deeply concerned and clear-eyed about the challenges the country is facing, but also unbelievably optimistic about where this country can be for us, our children, and their grandchildren. So, not only did we have the conference, you will remember we had a new constitution for this party ratified. Nigel signed away ownership of the party, so the party is now transitioning to become a party that is limited by guarantee, that will have no shareholders. It's very, very rare any politician of any sort gives up power. Nigel did just that because he understands how important this is. And for the next phase of our journey, as we embark on the mission, which we will fulfill, of becoming the next party of government, we know that we need to demonstrate to the British people that they can trust us. That they can trust us not just to secure our borders and stop the boats and have a coherent immigration policy, but with the NHS and with the economy and with taxation, all of the things that impact people's lives, cost of living. So we've done that already, and we are in the process now of completing that process with the Electoral Commission. It'll be done in the new year. We have opened 400 new branches. So at the general election, the day of the general election, Reform UK had 0 branches. We now have over 400 Reform branches across the country. And we know how important that is. Anyone who's studied the success of the Liberal Democrats, not in terms of their policy or their leader, other than in ticket receipts at Alton Towers and Chessington, but in terms of winning campaigns locally. Where the Lib Dems are present, boy are they present. And that's what we're focused on, is ensuring that the ground campaigning capabilities that at this party were largely non-existent, despite extraordinary enthusiasm, the processes and the systems and the technology just didn't exist. That is what we're assembling now. And we know we have, sitting right beside me, the most impactful and effective, and in our view, patriotic, political leader of our lifetimes. We know we need an effective ground campaign to fulfill our mission to become the next party of government. That's what the branches do for us. And then look at the polls. And look, polls are one thing, winning is another. But as I said, a year ago we were at 8%. We're now at 20%. And one of the things that I actually find really interesting, having come quite newly to politics, is, in technology and in business, you're generally trying to look at time horizons of 5 to 10 years and thinking about what does the world look like there. In politics, I found that people can barely look beyond today, let alone next week. And so 8% a year ago to 20% today, 15,000 members a year ago to in excess of 100,000 today. One doesn't need to be a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician to extrapolate that and consider where will reform be in a year, where will we be in 2 years and 3, and at the time of the next general election. So I'm incredibly optimistic. I'm incredibly enthusiastic. I've met so many of those members across the country, so many supporters. And by the way, if you're watching this at home and you support us, please go to our website and join. It really means a lot. Memberships cover almost all of our cost base as a party, and it's way, way low, I can tell you, than it is, for example, for the Tory party and the other big parties. We do an extraordinary amount with very little. And that's why we are the People's Army. Because we rely on enthusiasm and patriotic people to achieve our objectives. So I'm now going to hand over to a man who, according to an Ipsos poll just a few days ago, more British people have a favourable view of Nigel Farage than any other political leader in this country. And we are just getting started. It's an honour to be the chairman of this party. It's an honour to be able to announce that we now have 100,000 members and growing at a rate of knots. Outside of a general election period, by the way, a time when apparently no one really cares about politics, and history shows political party memberships generally don't grow. By the way, if you're talking about the Tory and Labour memberships, those have been declined. We would argue the Tory party membership is in terminal decline. We have all of the momentum. And the man who leads us on that journey, the man who inspires all of us, and the man who will lead us on the mission to become the next government of the United Kingdom, Mr. Nigel Farage.
Great stuff. Zia, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Well, I think we've timed this press conference rather well, given that at 9:30 this morning we got the latest immigration figures, which are horrendous. Horrendous if you want to get a GP appointment. Horrendous if you want to travel around Britain's motorways. Horrendous if you want your kids or grandkids to ever get a foot onto the housing ladder. Horrendous in terms of producing very disjointed societies and communities. And the message is pretty clear. 750,000 in the last year. And don't believe the lies and spin that it's a 20% reduction from the year before. It isn't. The year before's figures have been raised now in 2 instalments by 230,000. So let's get it into our heads. In 2023, under a Conservative government, nearly 1 million net people came into our country. This after manifestos in 2010, 2015, 2017 and 2019, promising in the first 3 they'd reduce the numbers to tens of thousands a year, and in the last one, a substantial reduction. I have had enough of being lied to by the Conservative Party. I don't believe they'll be forgiven at any point in the next few years for what they have done and the impact it's had on people's lives. And you might have noticed, the quicker the population rises, the poorer the average family in Britain becomes. And those figures are now undeniable. Of course, with Labour, it's even worse. And I don't think smashing the gangs is going to work. It's perhaps worth just mentioning briefly that the asylum bill, we've had those figures this morning, that has gone up by 36% in 1 year to 5.38 billion, and that doesn't even include the daily cost of what is happening in the English Channel with drones, with Border Force, and with the massive processing centre at Manston. I don't know what the true figure is, but it wouldn't be difficult to work out that it would be several multiples of what has been taken away from Britain's pensioners in terms of their winter fuel allowance and the hit that will be taken by British farmers. But then, why would they matter? They're British. They seem to be always at the back of the queue. So I'm pretty angry about those numbers today. I think the general population will be too. And for Kemi Badenoch to stand up yesterday and read off the autocue as she did, to say we got things slightly wrong. No, you didn't get things slightly wrong. You have fundamentally changed the lives of everybody in this country and diminished living standards for virtually everyone. Enough of the negativity. I'm delighted that on Tuesday of this week we went through the 100,000 number. I've led previous political parties. I led UKIP for many years, and the peak we got to then was 46,000. The remarkable thing about the rise over the course of the last few months is it's happened at a time when we're not particularly active. We are restructuring, reorganising. As Zia said, we now have 400 parliamentary constituencies that are up and running, and we're about to release them into the field. We're about to start delivering tens of millions of leaflets through doors. This rise has happened during a relatively quiet period of reorganisation for the party. The appetite out there is quite extraordinary. The enthusiasm. I mean, you should have been at the Reform Christmas party last night that took place just down the road. I, of course, now being older and wiser, left early. And I didn't even get the chance to dance to YMCA, which is a bit of a regret. That's good news. You might have noticed that in by-elections, weekly by-elections that take place for district, borough or county councils, we've now become active. And last week in Kent, we won our first county council by-election, and we'll win another one between now and Christmas in a county not too far away from there. So we're taking that seriously. But The vast majority of Zia's time and the vast majority of my time is focused on one simple thing, and that is May the 1st next year. On May the 1st next year, we have the English County Council elections, some of them now, of course, unitary. There are 2,200 candidates that we need to find to fill those vacancies. We have so far vetted and approved over 1,000 of them, and we've put in place vetting standards far more rigorous than any political party in Britain has ever undergone before for people standing for local election. Those candidates will be beginning to be adopted, in fact, starting at the end of this week, and I promised I'd democratise the party, and yeah, it's up to the branches. They can choose who the candidates are off the approved list. So we expect to hit the ground running, out there campaigning, door-to-door, leafleting, gathering data, ready for those elections on May the 1st, and we'll do that starting very early in the new year. So I think this membership of 100,000, milestone though it is but a fraction of what we're actually capable of achieving. People want something different, and to carry on from what Zia said, if you come to a reform event, you'll find happy people. We are happy warriors. And it's because we actually genuinely think that this never-ending cycle of negativity, of economic decline and societal decline can be turned around with strong leadership. In fact, I think that's what the American public thought at their recent elections. And boy, am I looking forward to my new friend, Elon Musk, taking on the administrative state in America. It may well prove a blueprint that perhaps we can use if things go well after 2029. There's one other number I want to point out to you, and that is my personal TikTok account, which last week went through 1 million followers. And we get tens of millions of views on my TikTok account every single month. 2/3 of that million are under the age of 35. Half of them are under the age of 25. Something remarkable is happening with Gen Z. And it's not just happening here. It happened in America at the last election, where Trump got 44% of the under-30s to vote for him. Something that was unthinkable in 2016 and 2020. And it's happening across much of the rest of Europe too. A lot of those that seem to support me are 16 and 17, which is perhaps why the Labour government have decided not to lower the voting age. I put forward as a suggestion, I don't know. But there's something very exciting happening, and what we have to do is to turn that enthusiasm into people that actually register and go out to vote, and it's going to be one of the main jobs that Zia and I have over the course of the next few years. So I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made. I think there is a feeling. 2/3 of the British voting public, 2/3, say they would like a proper alternative to vote for, not just the main two that have been around for the last 105 years or so. And we intend to fill that gap. This time last year, I was in the Australian jungle, and my thoughts were very far away from re-entering the political fray. I thought, well, at last I've got a big payday, and I can enjoy life. But I just couldn't stand by and watch Brexit be squandered in the way that it was by the Conservative government. None of the potential advantages that it was offered, other than foreign policy, frankly, have been taken up. We've got self-government back. Now we need the right people in charge to deliver it. People that actually believe in a nation, believe in their people, and are unafraid to take on the centre-left consensus that so dominates all of our public services in this country, including, sadly, our educational establishment. So, to make it clear, we believe in Britain. We've only just started, but we are on our way. You can judge how well we're doing when we hold a press conference on May the 2nd. But I believe we're going to win a very large number of county council seats up and down this country. Now, we said that when we hit 100,000 members, the lucky winner would go out for a pint with Lee Anderson. Now, I fear that was deeply inaccurate. The use of the singular strikes me as being very unlikely with Lee. And by sheer coincidence, the 100,000 member happens to be a former Conservative Member of Parliament. Who'd believe that? Isn't that extraordinary that it should have worked out that way? Her name is Dame Andrea Jenkyns. And not only is Andrea joining the party, but after an internal selection process, she has now been selected as our candidate, and she will run to be the newly created Mayor of Lincolnshire on May the 1st next year, and I believe she has every chance of winning. Dame Andrea, I hope you're here.
I have to admit, I feel a bit shaky in the back of the stage. Today, I've joined the party of the brave. Our once great country is at a crisis point. Labour's record speaks volumes already, you must agree. They have compromised our British territories, fleeced our farmers, and they're punishing our pensioners. Their policies are anti-business, anti-aspiration, and detrimental to all that we hold dear as a country. In the past 5 months, as we've seen, our British people have been locked up for expressing their opinions, while real criminals are being released early onto our streets. This is not the Britain that we deserve. But in times of crisis, we need strong leadership. We need those patriotic, brave hearts to be a true voice for the people, and Reform is that voice. We need a party that champions truth, that stands up for the underdog, and that listens to the people. And this is why I have joined Reform. Under Nigel's bold leadership, Richard's dynamism, and the sharp intellect of Zia, Reform UK is surging and membership is soaring. We will be ready to challenge the tired two-party system, and we will deliver the fresh start this country so desperately needs. Now, leaving the Conservative Party, a party I have cherished for decades, was not an easy decision. I've long believed in conservatism and the principles that it should stand for. I stayed loyal. I fought to the bitter end in the general election, going down with a proverbial ship. But the truth is undeniable. The ship is sinking, and perhaps sadly beyond salvage. But enough is enough. It's time to step aboard a movement with vision and with purpose, and the courage to fight for Britain's future is Reform UK, the movement, and together we will save the country. I'm incredibly honoured to be chosen to stand as a Reform candidate for the Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire. Everyone knows me as a Yorkshire lass, but I actually had a footprint since childhood in Greater Lincolnshire. I went to primary school in North Lincolnshire, secondary schools and college in North East Lincolnshire. I graduated from the University of Lincoln, and I've lived and worked across the wider Lincolnshire area. And I became the first Conservative county councillor to be elected for Boston North West. And as my record of an MP shows, I will always put the people first ahead of politics. I will stand up for common sense and always do the right thing. I will stand up for frugal conservatism, ensuring that every penny of taxpayers' money is a penny well spent. And I will root out the woke leftist agenda that often creeps into all levels of government, whichever colour. I understand this great county and its challenges. From Grimsby, where I went to college, I've seen the decline of our once great fishing port. My late grandfather, Walter, was a fisherman, and I'll put together a plan to reinvigorate the Humber area. During Brexit, I worked with the likes of Nigel and Richard here today, And we stood up for our farmers, we stood up for our fishermen. And very sadly, our farmers and their livelihoods are facing a tremendous threat from this Labour government. I will speak up for them and I will fight for them. Over the coming weeks and months, and please watch this space, we, the Reform Party, have a true bold vision for Greater Lincolnshire, including infrastructure, investment, plans for supporting the food industries, and future-proofing our local economy by ensuring the workforce has the skills needed so the area can truly thrive. Now, as a mum, I'm proud to be a mum. It's the best role in the world. I want to create a brilliant future for our children and also ensuring that the best support are there for the elderly in our county. To the people of Greater Lincolnshire, in me you have someone who will fight for you. I always do what is right and I always take the common sense approach. We stand today, the British people feel betrayed. Our culture, our values and our communities are under siege. Streets that should be safe havens are rife with crime. Young people cannot afford to rent, let alone buy a house. And migration is out of control. But amidst this chaos, there is hope. And that hope is reform. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the Q&A portion of this press conference. We'll start with broadcast journalists over here, and then we'll have a separate huddle with the three of us with print journalists, if that's okay. Let's start with, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Alex Forsyth, BBC News. You've talked about wanting to be a party of government by 2029. How many councillors do you need to get elected in the May county elections to be on that trajectory, and at the Senedd elections in 26? Can you put a number on what success looks like? And Andrea Jenkyns, if I may, how long have you been thinking about joining Reform UK, given you had a picture of Nigel Farage on one of your election leaflets when you were a Conservative candidate?
I always like to push the boundaries and be a bit cheeky. Look, I've always respected Nigel, and as we've, what is it, 6 years, Richard, that we first worked together during Brexit. We are politically aligned, and how long have I been thinking about it? Well, I was tempted before the general election, but I am a loyal person to a party. I might not be loyal to prime ministers, as we've seen in the past, but I'm loyal to parties, and I believed, as I said, in going down with that ship fighting. I was elected as a Conservative, and I got knocked out as a Conservative. But I feel, unfortunately, the party's become tired. I've got amazing friends in the party, Boris Pretty, Robert Jenrick, and there's some decent people there, but I feel the party's lost its way, very sadly. And reform actually is more closely aligned, and I think it's actually my natural home.
Yeah, the truth of it is that half the Conservative Party in Parliament should join Reform and the other half should join the Lib Dems. They are hopelessly split on everything. You can see the internal bickering and infighting hasn't changed one little bit. They are literally, the brand is broken, the product doesn't resonate with the general public, and what we're going to do, we're going to replace the Conservatives as the opposition force to Labour as the next general election comes along. And I'm not just sitting here saying that. I haven't come out of semi-retirement for fun. I didn't need to do this. I'm doing it because I genuinely think that once every 50, 100 years, there comes along, whatever the political system, and yes, of course, we've got first past the post, but once every 50, 100 years, there comes along that moment where sort of epochal political change can happen, and I think we're at that moment right now. To answer your question, I'm following the Paddy Ashdown model. Paddy Ashdown was that dynamic leader of the Lib Dems who understood until you'd won a significant number of district council seats and county council seats, you weren't even in the race to win parliamentary election seats or by-election seats. That was the model that Ashdown built for the Lib Dems through the 1990s that finally got them into a coalition government in 2010. That is very much the model that we're following. You mentioned the Senate elections. I think our prospects there are remarkably good. We've got some very high caliber people coming on board in Wales, which we'll let you know about over the course of the next few months. And Scotland. I mean, Scotland, where UKIP really didn't trouble the scorer. We managed to get one MEP under the D'Hondt system in the European elections and one for the Brexit Party too in 2019. But beyond that, we never really challenged to win seats at Holyrood. But you'll see, I mean, last Thursday, there were 3 council by-elections in Glasgow. Glasgow, our second weakest part of Scotland in the general election. And there we were polling, 13%, 12.5%, 18% in those local council by-elections. And I think that one of the things that will change radically over the course of the next few years is the scales are beginning to fall from the eyes of businesses and of the public, that we are living through an industrial massacre, Luton this week just being the latest example, this religious obsession with chasing net zero targets is giving consumers the most expensive electricity prices in Europe. It's giving our industries the most expensive electricity prices in the world. And Miliband's mad plans, which only really follow on from Theresa May and Boris Johnson. Remarkable yesterday at the dispatch box, there was Kemi Badenoch saying, well, you've closed Luton because of your EV targets, to which the Prime Minister could very easily respond, well, actually, they were your targets. It was you that put them in place whilst you were in government. And there is going to be a radical rethink about what we're doing in the name of net zero. And so I'm pretty optimistic we can do well in Scotland too. So the answer to your question is lots. Yes, we have to win a lot of council seats next year. We have to win, and yes, it's going to have to be in the hundreds to be credible. Is that an easy thing to achieve? No. Are we going to do it? Watch this space.
Yeah, please.
Hi. Thank you, Beth Rigby from Sky News. Nigel Farage, you just spoke about the net migration figures, 900,000 in the year to June 2023, 728,000 in the year to June 2024, all under Conservative governments, which gave you a very potent message in the general election of people who voted for Brexit and then felt dreadfully let down. But you just said there that Labour are even worse. You have nothing to base that on. They haven't yet got a record on migration. And Keir Starmer says he has a plan to drive down migration and has made that commitment. Are you saying that because actually you need Labour to fail on migration in order to try and feather your own nest and improve your chances at the next general election? And to Andrea, it must have been quite a difficult decision to defect from the Conservative Party to reform. Do you worry about what colleagues might think? Do you think there might be a world in which the two parties might merge and become a party to the centre-right, or would you like to now kill off your former colleagues? Thank you.
Okay. In answer to your question, the Labour government are failing spectacularly on a number of fronts. Just 4 months into government, a precipitous fall in the confidence ratings in Keir Starmer as leader in Labour's polls, and we see that every Thursday with these local by-elections that I was talking about a moment ago. Ed Miliband's promise that they would reduce electricity bills are wrong, and I can tell you that because I've seen the strike prices. 171 successful wind energy auctions, both offshore and onshore, all struck at double the current market price. I'm coming to your question. So on energy bills, they are failing. On migration, what I can tell you is the incoming Labour government said there would be fewer cross-channel migrants going into hotels. We learned this morning that number has increased by 6,000 just since Labour came to power. But let's really get to it. What about returns? There was a boast the other week from the Prime Minister that aeroplanes were taking illegal immigrants back to where they came from. We've got the numbers this morning. There is a fall in the numbers that have been deported from Q2 to Q3, when in most years, because of the weather, that quarter-on-quarter move shows that actually the number has gone up. Smashing the gangs, I've been hearing this about drugs in this country ever since I could barely walk. It's failed on that, and it will fail on stopping cross-channel migration. And on the broader question of who can come into the country and settle, they seem to be wholly unconcerned on that issue. Frankly, I think that a very, very large number of people that voted Labour at the last election did so because they weren't the Tories, didn't really know the Reform brand. The Reform brand is very, very new in the minds of voters. And let's face it, over 95% of Reform candidates on July the 4th were effectively paper candidates. They didn't have the branches, the structures, the money, the advertising, the posters. They were literally paper candidates. And we were just too new to a large chunk of the electorate. So, if you ask me, where will our future increase in vote come from? I think more will come from Labour from this position than it will come from the Conservatives. But, I think you're seeing a realigning of how voters view the old left-right spectrum.
Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Beth, you hit the nail on the head. It was a difficult decision. I mean, when you've been with a party, decades, it becomes a family. But you mentioned, about what will people think. Obviously, they don't know until now. Look, during the Brexit years, when I was calling Theresa May to resign, I've been there in the tea room where people avoided me, sat on different tables who were, I considered friends at the time. But I stuck to my guns, and to me it's about doing what's right. And the true friends will stay loyal as friends forever. I think it's times like this which test true friendship, and I hope that the true ones will stay around. Now, regarding, you asked the question, Beth, about do I want to annihilate the Conservatives? Look, I think what we saw in the election, all the, besides, I'd say, a handful, all the decent, true, what I'd say Thatcherite Conservatives, I believe, lost their seat. I mean, I would have lived here as leader, or the likes of Robert Jenrick, but there's only a handful true Conservatives in the elected party, in what I believe, that are left, unfortunately.
Yes, please.
You say you want to be the next party of government. The Conservatives laid out a sort of broad framework yesterday for their plans for immigration. Can you give us a bit more detail on what your immigration policy would be if you were the next party of government? And just one other quick question. Are there any other Conservative or former Conservative MPs up your sleeve?
Yes, I mean, Kemi Badenoch read off an autocue yesterday in a rather robotic fashion, making no specific promises of any kind at all, other than what I'm going to do will be even tougher than leaving the ECHR. They shall be the terrors of the earth. I mean, it was that kind of speech. Look, the Conservative Party had a choice. If they'd voted for Robert Jenrick, they would have voted to leave the ECHR, which would at least have given you the opportunity to deport potential terrorists, to deport those who come here illegally. That court is activist. It's extended its scope in the most remarkable way over the course of the last few years. By the way, something that will get discussed tomorrow, I think, when we have the assisted dying bill before Parliament. The role of the ECHR in that will be a worry in the minds of some members. The Tories had the choice. They could have voted to leave the ECHR to give themselves a start to dealing with the problem. They have rejected it. They have rejected it. We're very clear. We're very clear. You cannot control your borders or decide who comes to live, work and settle here, all the while you have that convention written into British law.
And can I come on that point, actually, about leaving the ECHR? When I was a Conservative MP, I got a petition with the Conservative Post, Claire, and we got, in the end, over 50,000 signatures in a short space of time. This is what all the people who wrote to me as an MP, they want this. They want to bring back control, and this is the only way that we can do this, and I completely agree with Nigel on this.
Yes, please, here in the front row.
Thank you, Amy Lewis, ITV News. It's a couple of questions for you, Nigel. You've been very critical today of Labour and of the Conservatives, but what is your actual plan to bring down immigration?
We just heard the start of it. Without leaving the ECHR, there is nothing we can do, literally nothing we can do to combat illegal immigration. And when it comes to legal immigration, that's perfectly clear, that the more low-skilled people we take into Britain, the poorer the rest of the population gets. Do you know, in 6 of the last 8 quarters, GDP per capita has fallen, whilst net migration figures have legally reached the highest number ever. The link is clear. We have to drastically reduce the numbers coming into Britain. We have to set skills levels that are very, very high. If we do have shortages in other sectors, then we'll give time-dependent work permits only. You know, not the right to come and I mean, as Kemi campaigned for students to bring your mum and all the rest of it. So there's many things that can be done to get the numbers down. Would it lead to wages going up in some areas like the care sector? Yes, it would. It would mean British people, you know, actually being incentivized to come off benefits and go to work. But it would need to work, it would need to be allied to lifting the rate at which tax begins to be paid to £20,000 a year. So you'll need those things together, and if you do them, you can drastically reduce the numbers coming into the country. And as I say, if there are 1 or 2 shortages that occur, it just means British people will get paid more.
I think I know the answer to this, but the Tories, and you obviously are after the same voters, can you see a world where you would join forces with them?
No, none at all. None at all. I've been lied to and let down by them, just the same as everybody else. You know, I made a pretty magnanimous gesture back in 2019. You know, I could have gone around the country rubbishing Boris's deal. I think that would have led to, I think 72 Lib Dems would have won that time if I'd done that. And I said, no, actually, we need to get this over the line. You know, Boris Johnson has made some very specific promises, and frankly, apart from foreign policy, where we do stand taller in the world, and we are free to make our own decisions on virtually everything else, I feel completely let down by them. And frankly, my motto now is never trust a Tory, simple as.
Yes, please.
Hi there, Paul McNamara, Channel 4 News. You've reached 100,000 members. It's significant. It takes millions, though, to win a general election. Typically, those millions are sought from whichever side, reaching out to the centre ground. Are you going to be making a pitch to reach out to the centre ground, or are you going to be relying on politicising people who have never voted before?
There is a very different centre ground out in the country than the so-called centre ground in mainstream media, the civil service, members of parliament. They're 2 different centre grounds. And I watched that yesterday. I watched that in the debate on Luton yesterday, where the heretic, Richard Tice, where's he gone? I mean, it was literally, you know, it was somebody committed heresy in the temple. This debate had been going on for an hour about, isn't it terrible, all these poor men have lost their jobs in Luton. And Richard gets up and says, but this is because of our net zero obligations, and we've closed our chemicals industry, we've closed our refining industry, we've closed our smelting industry, we've destroyed primary steel making, all because we have, through net zero policies, the most expensive energy for manufacturers in the world. And I mean, you'd have thought Richard was on a completely different planet. I mean, they looked at the poor chap. I'm surprised men in white coats didn't come. But if you go out into the country, you know, are people concerned about the environment? Of course they are. Of course they are. But, you know, when you give them the arguments and the facts, they all agree that committing economic harry-carry in the name of doing this, all the while China builds 80 new coal-fired power stations every year, makes no sense. So I would argue, in response to your question, that what we stand for is plain common sense. It is not doctrinaire. It is not dogmatic. It is based on principles that we think family, community, and country are things that need to be defended, protected, and are under assault in every single way. And I think you will find that's the centre ground of majority public opinion on this country on issue after issue.
One last one for you. You don't want to join the Conservative Party. During the recent Tory leadership, did any of them reach out to you and ask you if you might want to join them?
No, I don't think they did. I think I'm a complete pariah. At least I hope so.
Yes, over there in the corner.
Anna Gross from the Financial Times. How do you think that your relationship with Donald Trump and your kind of blossoming relationship with Elon Musk might support your ambitions to professionalise the party? And do you have any sense from them that they might lend their support later down the line in any form?
So what we're going to do with all the print media, we're going to have a huddle and do them all. I'll answer that quickly, and then we'll draw stumps. The big difference with Trump's campaign in 2024 compared to 2016, it was so much more professional. It was completely different. There was an atmosphere of calm at Mar-a-Lago over the course of the last 18 months, despite everything that he was being put through. You know, Susie Wiles had been put in there. She'd given it authority. She'd given it direction. It was a completely different campaign. They go in on the 20th of January into the White House, and he's got the power to appoint 3,000 people to positions. They've been working on those people for the last 18 months. I've seen what professionalising the campaign did for Trump, and it was a big success. And the reason I've got people like Zia now working for me is that's exactly not what we're going to do, it's what we are doing now with this party. And two other quick points on Trump, if I can. One, it wasn't just Donald Trump they were voting for. Yes, he was the towering figure, but on one side was Robert F. Kennedy, on the other side was Elon Musk. He presented a much broader front than just the one man to the American people, and that's very much what I want to do with reform. You know, this is not going to be a one-man band just with me at the front. You're going to see you're seeing a couple of them today, prominent figures that'll be up there. What he also did was put together a remarkable coalition of voters, with a big rise in the black vote for Trump, an even bigger rise in the Hispanic vote for Trump. And I'll just leave you with this thought, that in the last general election, more members of what they call the BAME community voted Reform than voted Liberal Democrat. And I think you're going to be very surprised when you see the coalition of people that we put together. There were 500 people last night at that London Christmas party. And if you'd gone round the room and looked at the age profile, looked at the different kinds of backgrounds, I think you'd have been very, very surprised. And are Trump and Elon going to support me in the run-up to 2029? Well, that's what friends are for, isn't it?
All right, ladies and gentlemen. With that, we will call stumps on this portion of the press conference now, and we'll go and do a huddle over there for print media. Thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate it.